Good evening. I'm Peter Alexander in for Jose. Tonight, the Middle East and U.S. are bracing for what Iran's supreme leader vows will be harsh revenge after that American airstrike killed Iran's most powerful and ruthless military commander. In Baghdad, rockets tonight falling on the Green Zone, home to the heavily fortified U.S. embassy, as tens of thousands of militiamen and mourners march through the streets. Amid threats of retaliation, fear and uncertainty about where, how, and when that response might take place. We have it all covered in the region and here at home tonight. And we begin with our chief foreign correspondent, Richard Engel, who is in Iraq. Richard?
Good evening, Peter. U.S. intelligence officials are trying to figure out where and when Iran's response will be, but we are already seeing some of the aftermath of the U.S. assassination of that Iranian general, with new attacks in Iraq today and angry protests.
The fallout has begun. Tens of thousands of mourners and protesters in Baghdad and Tehran shouted death to America and revenge after a U.S. drone strike killed Iran's top general, Qasem Soleimani, and an Iraqi Shiite militia leader who was with him. The U.S. military denied multiple reports that it targeted the Shiite militias again last night in a second strike in Iraq. In Baghdad, the U.S. embassy was on pins and needles. For days, American aircraft have been patrolling above to see if protesters might storm the complex, Marines on guard inside. And around 3,000 more U.S. troops are heading to the region. Reinforcements from the 82nd Airborne Division heading out today. And this time, the conflict may not be limited to Iraq. Iran's president was only the latest official in his country to promise revenge against the United States. But where and when? The U.S. men's national soccer team postponed a training trip to Qatar, citing security reasons. Iran has a network of militias it can rely on and mobilize, from Lebanon to Syria, Afghanistan to Iraq. A shadow army of militias and guerrilla groups across the Middle East, now vowing to avenge their late leader at a time and place of their choosing.
And Richard joins us again now live. Richard, what more do we know about those rocket attacks today?
So the U.S. military just issued a statement confirming that there were two attacks, one a rocket landing inside the Green Zone in Baghdad, and another with multiple rockets fired at an air base north of Baghdad housing U.S. personnel. They said that there were no American casualties. There's been no claim of responsibility, but the presumption is that it was those Iraqi Shiite militia groups showing their anger.
And Richard, for clarity, President Trump said that the strike on Soleimani was to stop a war. But how close are we right now? You're on the ground to a large-scale conflict.
Well, frankly, Peter, it would not take much. We are on the precipice of a very slippery slope. You have more troops heading toward the region. I think all of us who watched those pictures today of 82nd Airborne troops getting their kit, heading out to the Middle East, can remember what it was like a decade ago. And now threats, attacks in the Green Zone. It would not take much to escalate this into a full-scale conflict. Peter.
Richard Engel on the ground for us in Iraq tonight. Richard, thank you very much. President Trump and his allies are defending the deadly airstrike. And late today, a bold new warning from the commander-in-chief saying the U.S. could strike again. Here's Hans Nichols.
After spending the day at his golf club, a fresh threat from President Trump. We have targeted 52 Iranian sites representing the 52 American hostages taken by Iran many years ago, warning that if Iran strikes any Americans or American assets, those targets will be hit very fast and very hard. The president claiming that American lives were in danger based on intelligence that has yet to be shared with Congress.
This president has to make a case that there was an imminent threat.
And as Secretary of State Mike Pompeo calls allies, he's being met with criticism, not congratulations.
The Brits, the French, the Germans all need to understand that what we did, what the Americans did, saved lives in Europe as well.
And Vice President Mike Pence under fire for claiming that Soleimani assisted in the clandestine travel to Afghanistan of 10 of the 12 terrorists behind the 9/11 attacks. But according to the 9/11 Commission, neither Iran nor Hezbollah were involved in the planning of the attacks. There's no known intelligence to suggest that Soleimani was personally involved, and there were 19 9/11 attackers, not 12. Meanwhile, on the 2020 campaign, candidates questioning if the Trump administration has considered the consequences of targeting Iran's top military commander.
Patriotism is not starting an endless war.
There's a lot we have to learn between now and the next few days to weeks as to whether or not there was any rationale for what had happened.
President Trump's actions represent a dangerous escalation.
Hans Nichols joins us now. Hans, what prompted the president's stark warning tonight on Twitter?
Peter, the president is reacting to what he says is bold talk from Iran about targeting specific USA assets. He's saying this is a warning and that the USA wants no more threats. Peter?
Hans Nichols on the ground in Florida for us tonight. Hans, we thank you. As tensions rise overseas, law enforcement officials say for the moment there are no credible threats here at home. But tonight, authorities are not taking any chances. NBC's Gabe Gutierrez has that part of the story.
Tonight, worries over war. Protests from San Francisco to Washington to New York, and fears of retaliation.
I think every American should be very worried. This was an act of war.
Police around the U.S. are stepping up security.
We also know that deterrence is achieved by being unpredictable. So if we think bag checks are necessary, we'll do bag checks.
The Department of Homeland Security says there are no specific credible threats here in the U.S., but law enforcement agencies such as the LAPD say they're monitoring the situation. While some experts think a conventional attack on U.S. soil is unlikely, since it would provoke even harsher retaliation, others warn Iran has many other options, such as attacks on Americans abroad, targeting U.S. allies with long-range missiles, or notably, a cyber attack. Experts point to 2016, when the Justice Department indicted several Iranians for hacking into the public websites of U.S. banks years earlier, and for breaking into the computer system of a small dam outside New York City.
The Iranian cyber capabilities are much more mature now, much more aggressive, and in the past have demonstrated the ability not only to attack systems and disrupt them, as with American banks, but also to get into systems, to destroy them, and to destroy data.
And Gabe joins us now. Gabe, the Department of Homeland Security just put out a new bulletin. What can you tell us about that?
Well, Peter, there is still no credible threat, but the bulletin emphasizes Iran's capability of launching a cyber attack against critical infrastructure here in the U.S. Peter?
Gabe Gutierrez in Times Square tonight. Gabe, thank you. To Australia now, where those relentless wildfires are growing by the minute, threatening people, wildlife, and even impacting countries thousands of miles away. NBC's Janice Mackey-Freyer reports.
Tonight, strong winds and unstoppable flames. Fires on Kangaroo Island so powerful they stir up fire twisters of their own. And close to Nowra, a bushfire jumped over the river, igniting a new blaze that triggered a warning to seek shelter or get out.
We've got sprinklers set up on the roof.
Donna and Jamie Duba are staying put, at least for now.
We've covered all bases and we've got backup plans and safe zones.
And if need be, if you have to leave, you'll leave.
We get in the car and go.
Yeah.
Bushfires have burned more than 12 million acres here, an area 40 times the size of Los Angeles, spewing a smoky haze that's visible from space. Army reservists helping with evacuations and supplies.
There's a very clear connection between global warming and wildfires and drought.
An estimated 500 million animals have died. The lucky ones rescued and cared for at sanctuaries across the state.
There's a little girl. You're amazing.
Where orphaned wallabies, wombats, and other wildlife can recover, but will struggle in habitats that are wiped out.
Smoke inhalation is a huge concern.
Yes, it is. And the other thing is when they come out, there's no food around for them. No water, no food.
On social media, celebrities are posting messages of support and pledging donations to local fire services with a long, hot summer ahead.
There are nearly 200 fires burning now. The air is filled with smoke and ash. The forecast, though, is calling for cooler temperatures and the possibility of some much-needed rain.